Bitcoin ATMs, they're popping up in grocery stores, gas stations, and vape shops. Instead of gift cards, scammers are using them to get your money. That's on this edition of the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amy Cutler, and I'm joined by fellow investigative reporter Morgan Lowe and investigative photojournalist and producer Gilbert Zermano, or Z. I got it right that time.
You got it right.
Yeah. So these machines look like any other ATM or kiosk that you'd find at a store. You're supposed to deposit the money into them and get cryptocurrency in return. But thanks to scammers, some of the people who are putting in money are finding that once they make that deposit, that money is gone forever. And Z, you're here because one of your friends actually almost became a victim of this.
He did. She did. Excuse me. We're not supposed to use names, but in October 11th, she received a phone call, and it seemed very legitimate. It was from a Maricopa County Sheriff's Office captain with a real name that you could Google, and he does actually work for MCSO. The judge that had sent the order, real judge in Maricopa County. And they were tagging her for not showing up for jury duty. And the caller, very convincing male, gave her a civil case number. Seemed really legit, and gave her options that she said that she could go to jail right away, or she could pay a fine that reached up to about $1,500. And wouldn't let her get off the phone to try to make some few phone calls. And he said, no, if you need to take care of this right now, or we will head in your direction and arrest you.
That's terrifying.
It is.
So they were accusing her of missing jury duty and saying, pay up or you're going to go to jail.
Right. To the point where he said, do not get off the line. Don't try to call anybody because we will head in your direction right away. We know where you are. And she texted me and that she needed some help. And I started texting her. She wasn't returning my text. Fortunately, we're on Fine Friends. And then I saw that she was at a bank.
Wow.
She was already at the bank.
Yeah, she was at the bank, at a bank really close to where she lived. And she had already gotten $1,500 out. And she was on her way to pick up some gift cards. And he had instructed her to meet him at not the Maricopa County office or the courts, but in the parking lot.
Wow.
So we have all been in the sort of scam busters business for decades. And so immediately something like this stands out to us as, oh, brother, that's a scam. But to a regular person who gets a call like this, I think the stress puts some of that doubt and replaces it with fear that they did something wrong and they're getting in trouble. And it sounds like these scammers use that to their advantage.
They do, because he was very adamant and with given a civil number, given a real name, even if she got on the phone and Googled the name, which she did, and it popped up, Captain so-and-so and Judge so-and-so, they're real guys, because you can do that on your phone. You can go Google. And she saw that, and she said, holy cow, this is legit. And never triggering, and she's smart. I mean, she's really smart.
Yeah.
So they're never triggering, well, that seems odd that I need to pay $1,500 in gift cards at a parking lot. Never registered. And I was texting her going, this is a scam. This is a scam. You need to hang up right away. And finally she did, thankfully. And then I started doing some research on what was going on and found out that she was very embarrassed by it.
So these are sophisticated scams. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about who's behind these scams, because it's not Joe Schmo, street criminal down the street doing this.
No, certainly not. And we spoke with some people who lost a lot of money. Take a listen to what we found.
Hello? really sounded legitimate.
Tamara Glarum thought she was doing everything right. What appeared to be a problem with her PayPal account sent her searching for help. She Googled what she thought was the number, but instead she was connected with a scammer.
He said, by the way, I want you to know that someone is trying to get into all of your accounts, and we have a fraud department that's going to walk you through how we can fix that.
Tamara says the guy on the other end sounded legitimate. He even emailed her a copy of his work ID to gain her trust. But his next request should have raised a red flag.
He said, in order for me to catch this person, I have to duplicate all the transactions that he did. And I said, well, why do you need my money? He says, because we want to pretend like he's getting this money so that we can catch him.
Tamara was instructed to purchase several gift cards in varying amounts, all to try and catch the crook. Then she was told to take more money out, putting that into a Bitcoin ATM.
And I was getting really nervous about all of this going on. But he seemed like he was legitimate. He said, don't worry, I'm not going to take your money. Your money's safe.
Peoria police confirmed she lost nearly $28,000. It's one of the 24 recent incidents involving unregulated Bitcoin ATMs. In total, just in Peoria last year, they say families lost nearly $1 million. In 2023, the FBI found people in Arizona reported losing about $325 million. And that's just what was reported. Experts say there are about 600 Bitcoin ATMs statewide, and as that number grows, so do the risks.
What do you tell these people when they reach out to you about this?
What can you say? You know, you just pretty much tell them that just sorry, and there's nothing much we can do.
Ron Norfleet is the sole investigator in the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office fraud unit. Unable to solve the growing problem on his own, Norfleet reached out to the Arizona Attorney General's office for help.
Let's do it.
We rode along with Norfleet as he stopped by dozens of Bitcoin ATMs, posting these signs. It's part of a new initiative to warn the public their money might be in danger.
They are Hollywood actors, and they can figure out your mood about 2 nanoseconds once they get you on the phone.
So it was really eye-opening at the beginning just how much nefarious activity, how much fraud happened.
Anthony Zervos is a fraud analyst for Digital Mint, a company that used to own and operate Bitcoin ATMs. Their ATMs used to flag new customers who were making large transactions, running them through a series of questions to determine if they were being scammed.
Maybe 2 in 10 were legitimate, maybe 2 in 10 were actually like, I know what I'm doing.
But most Bitcoin ATM operators don't have those precautions in place. In Arizona, they're not required to. Instead, users are typically guided through a series of prompts like this, which advocates say are easy to swipe through.
If this is going to be part of our lives moving forward, let's put some rules around it and try to protect people.
Seniors are particularly susceptible. That's why Brendan Blake with AARP Arizona says they've appealed to lawmakers on the state and federal level.
It's clear that we need a national standard, and that's why I'm introducing federal legislation.
During his time as chair of the Judiciary Committee, Illinois Senator Dick Durbin wrote to the 10 largest Bitcoin ATM operators requesting that more safeguards be put in place.
The industry ought to step up and help us write those standards.
When did you realize that all of this was some kind of fraud or scam?
When he said, I'm putting the money back in, and it never went back in.
Tamara is speaking out in the hopes that she can prevent someone else from being scammed. The consequences are real and devastating.
It was all that I had because I'm on Social Security. That was my savings and my IRA.
Now, the AARP tells us that any request to pay or make a deposit through a crypto ATM is a big red flag. Legitimate businesses and most government agencies don't accept payment through crypto ATMs. Again, they don't accept payment from crypto.
And that's part of the hard part. I think a lot of people think that there's this new technology out there and they don't realize how easy it is to fall victim to one of these things.
Yeah. I think they hear crypto and a lot of people don't really understand what it is. And so it sounds like future, it sounds like, oh, that's okay. And then they're already sort of caught up by this crook or this con artist. Let's get back to your situation with your friend. How difficult was it for you to convince your friend that this was a scam?
I text messaged and then went back and looked at my phone. I text messaged 5 times, hang up and call me, 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 hang up and call me. And he had her on the line telling her, you know, if you hang up on me, I'm going to call you back. And if you don't answer 3 times, marshals are going to come to your door and arrest you. We know exactly where you are.
And that's what this investigator had told us. He called them Hollywood actors because he said that, you know, he's heard of, these are smart people falling for it. And then there's the embarrassment factor where some folks don't come forward because they feel like they shouldn't have fallen for it. And that also is part of the problem, because if police don't know the scale of the issue, then nothing changes.
Exactly. I mean, she had $1,500 in cash, and she was on her way to a grocery store to exchange them for gift cards that then she was going to hand over to this guy in a parking lot. And she's embarrassed. It is embarrassing because, you know, we all think of ourselves as smart people that will not fall for scams. And this scam has been around for a long time. I remember doing stories years and years ago from the elderly grandparents who get a phone call from young Jimmy who's in Mexico and he's about to go to Mexican jail and he needs, you know, $1,500 bail, and then they have them go to a Walmart and pick up gift cards and then send them somewhere so that little Jimmy can get out of jail. And, you know, it's easy because the grandparent will answer the phone and the younger person's voice will come on and say, "Grandma," and then they'll give a name. You know, "Eddie, is that you?" "Yeah, Grandma." And then it just starts from there. So once they get their hooks in you, it's really hard for you to get out of the trap. Yeah,
and in the past, this was, okay, wire me the money. And that was the red flag. It's like they didn't want cash, they didn't want a credit card or a check. Wire me the money. And then it was gift cards, like what happened with your friend. And now crypto, because we have these ATMs all over the place. It has made it much easier for the crooks and con artists to take advantage of people.
Exactly. And at the latest count, there are at least 600 of these Bitcoin ATMs just here in Arizona. It's crazy.
What was the stat that the investigator told you about how often they're used for legitimate purposes?
Yeah, it's only 2 out of every 10 transactions are legitimate. So, I mean, it is just mind-boggling.
What do these companies have to say for themselves?
Yeah, so we reached out to the 10 largest Bitcoin ATM operators, and they say that they are open to changing things, that they don't want scammers to be using their machines. There are some lawmakers who are proposing some changes. They say they're open to working with them. And I got to tell you, as part of the story, I went to buy some Bitcoin through one of these ATMs, and it was interesting to me because the lowest amount that I could put in was a $20 bill. So I had taken money from an ATM to put money in, and my dollar bills, my $10 bill wouldn't work. It was $20, and then it went all the way up to $10,000 that we could put in.
Wow. So the AARP offered this advice to somebody who might get caught up in a scam like this.
Seeing as imposter scams are the most common, I would say that to always verify before you transfer money anywhere. Call the people that they say they are, call the number that you have to confirm that. Also take a pause. A lot of what these scammers are going to try to do is keep you on the phone and keep you emotionally engaged in the conversation. Take a pause, take a step back and analyze the situation. Also, contact law enforcement if you do transfer money as soon as you possibly can. There might be a chance that you're able to, the faster you act, the more likely you are to get your money back. But I would generally say take a pause, try not to get as emotionally invested in the conversation that they're trying to get from you, and also verify.
And that former fraud analyst we spoke with says about 80% of the people that were routed his way were actively being scammed. Those were some emotional conversations, he explained. Just questioning what they were doing was sometimes enough, though, to get them to reconsider the money that they were giving. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to put like a number on it, but a lot of the customers that we spoke with, we would end up canceling the transactions because it would be uncovered of like, oh, I'm sending this to my significant other who needs it for medical expenses in Europe, or you know what, actually it is a law enforcement person that called me and it did seem a little weird, or we would get people telling us they were sending it to a very nondescript investment site, which after a couple of minutes of us looking up where they're sending it, it's a copy of, you could find the same website just with 50 different names. And you're like, this is an investment scam website. So I wouldn't be able to put like a specific number on it, but it was definitely more transactions than I initially thought I was going to be flagging and canceling when I started my job.
Okay, so that fraud analyst did a good job of saying, describing the scenarios of the people who would call on this. What do we know about who these bad guys are?
That's the problem. We don't really know that much about them because it is incredibly hard to track where this money goes. People are putting this money into wallets that don't belong to them, and that money is really hard to trace. And that's what we heard from police department after police department. They just don't have the resources available. We've seen some coverage on the national level about this going internationally, but it's really tough to see where the money actually goes.
And that's been one of the pluses that people who are in favor of Bitcoin and blockchain technology say, well, it's great because it's not really a national currency and it's untraceable. And that may be good for some people, but I tell you who it's really good for: crooks and money launderers. Because once they put the money in, it's not traceable. And so it is kind of like they've created this currency that is perfect for bad guys, for people to scam other people. And what we know from what we've seen in other cases is that a lot of these bad guys are in Eastern Europe, in Russia, and they're smart criminals. They're not street gang members. These are people who are able to target specific individuals, learn something about them, like, oh, they have, look at their social media and look at their young friends, like, oh, little Jimmy's in Mexico on spring break. So let's impersonate little Jimmy to grandma and say he's going to go to jail if you don't pay up. Or in this situation, learn enough about an area to be able to impersonate a real police officer, law enforcement official, put the name of a real judge and convince somebody maybe from a randomly drawn number that they're in trouble. But these are smart people, and they've figured out this tool to use to shake down all kinds of people. When you've asked, so I'm not a financial expert, but I would imagine that any company just can't go and put an ATM somewhere. Like there had to be some kind of approval. How did this become legal?
That's a good question. I think it's just flown under the radar. There is no legislation, there's no regulation here in Arizona. And so basically now they're having to be reactive instead of proactive to this. And I should mention the other part of this is you put the money into the machine, and some of these machines charge insane amounts as transaction fees, like upwards of 20%. And that's not even disclosed to you. So it was interesting. I put $20 into this Bitcoin ATM, And I looked in my wallet, I only had $11.
that's-
So it might have gone down in value in 2 days,
That's
but
a 40%, 40+% transaction fee.
yes.
Wow. I mean, I have seen proposals to allow people to pay their city services bill in cryptocurrency. There are people in positions of authority in our state and in other states who someone has gotten to and explained this is a really good idea to allow this to happen. And did you get the idea in investigating this story that the people who could do something about this are educated on the downsides of crypto enough?
I don't think so. I think that this is just coming on people's radar. It was this new hot thing. I remember, 15 years ago, we were doing stories when the first Bitcoin ATM came about, and it was this new cool thing. And, people feel like they could make a lot of money if they invest in it. But I think a lot of people don't realize the risks to it. It's not backed by anything. And so the value of it really fluctuates. So you put money into it, and then the next day it could be worth more or it could be worth a lot less. And that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, when you're buying a cryptocurrency, you are basically buying something with the idea that more people are going to want to buy it. I have friends who say that's no different than the stock market. It is different from the stock market. The stock market, you're buying a piece of a company, and that company does stuff. And so it's backed by that. Crypto, you're buying it on the faith, your good faith, that other people are going to want that, and it's going to go up in value. And the problem is there's a lot of people in bad faith in that marketplace. It will be interesting to see. There's been a lot reported on the fact that the Trump administration and President Trump's campaign was backed by a lot of people who are in the legitimate cryptocurrency business. People that really believe that this currency and this way of transacting business could have benefits now and in the future. And so it will be interesting to see if they come up with some, I guess, common sense regulations that can muscle out the bad element that has taken advantage of crypto. But you talk to a lawmaker and you hear one thing, oh, there's a lot of potential with this. I have yet to talk to any law enforcement agency or agent that says they view this as being worth the downside, which is you can't trace the money, so it becomes a real tool for bad guys to target victims.
And the state attorney general's office has looked into some technology that would make tracking easier, but that is like $60,000 per machine. So you think about that and the number of law enforcement agencies you have statewide, and that makes it really difficult. And then, you have a smaller department like Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. They've got one fraud investigator for their entire unit. So you imagine he's getting all these calls, and he's an older guy and admits that he's not tech savvy. So, I mean, it's a lot for you to expect these law enforcement agencies to have to combat this. And you had mentioned in the case of your friend, there was an advisory. The police department tried to be proactive, and it still didn't help your friend.
Yeah, right. Maricopa County put out a press release in July that there was this phone scam that's targeting potential jurors. And they put out word in July, and my friend got the phone call in October. So the information is out there. I guess you guys may remember the IRS scam that happened back in 2012, and I know it was that date because my daughter was a freshman at the University of Arizona and got a phone call from a supposed IRS agent who she owed back taxes, and they needed her to confirm her Social Security number and her date of birth, and over the phone. And she freaked out and hung up on him, and then called me immediately right away. So that never took hold, but it shook her, And that's the thing about these calls that people receive, and it shakes them to their core. because that's really scary to do. You mentioned about this current administration's attitude towards Bitcoin. The perfect storm that I see that is kind of interesting to me and scares me a little bit is that this current administration is all about deregulation, and they want to deregulate banks and the people who oversee banks and who are the gatekeepers of that kind of stuff. And this Bitcoin seems to be kind of the wild, wild west with no sheriffs in town.
Right.
Scary.
Yeah. You look at the number of scams, and we used to do this scam alert every Wednesday night when we were just CBS 5. And every Wednesday, it was really easy to find a new scam that we'd put an alert out. And every year, we'd look at the year-end numbers, and you included numbers in your story of how much money crooks and con artists get from people just here in Arizona. And it's absolutely amazing. And very sad how much money gets stolen. And yet you have one fraud investigator in like Yavapai County, and it's great that they have a fraud investigator. But this is a type of crime that is woefully under-investigated. And these crimes are incredibly difficult to prosecute and to get the bad guy, because it could be in a whole different country. So again, like it just seems like you're a fraud investigator, if you're a prosecutor who is enforcing Arizona's Consumer Fraud Act, it is really a tough place to be to begin with. And now you're faced with this tool, these ATMs, that according to the investigators are used primarily to rip people off, and and they're all around. And we're not putting any intent on the operators of those ATMs. Those are legitimate businesses. They're just, these tools are being used by bad guys. And it's just got to be frustrating to know that still out there. What they were putting flyers next to the ATM saying, warning people.
Yeah, and that was an initiative that was launched by the State Attorney General's office and the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, which good on them for doing something, but it was just interesting to see this is the best you got, is putting signs next to it. And then it was interesting because there was some pushback, the investigator was saying, from some of these stores, because they were, I'm sure that there's some percentage of what they get. So there was some incentive for them to have the ATMs there. So there was a little bit of pushback to the signs. And again, they were just signs that warn that they could be being scammed, that are put next to these ATMs.
I mean, if the IRS is calling you and saying you need to pay a fine, and the only place you can pay it is at an ATM and a vape store, there may be a red flag there. Yeah. And we're laughing, but this works.
Yes.
Exactly.
If this didn't work, the bad guys wouldn't be doing it, because they don't put effort into, schemes that don't work. Well, there is a bill in the House, HB 2387, that would impose at least a licensing requirement for Bitcoin ATMs beginning next year. Operators would have to maintain detailed records of transactions for the last 5 years and set a transaction limit at $1,000 a day. That's still in committee, but the AARP, who supports it, says they are cautiously optimistic about this.
Yeah, and we should mention that bill does have bipartisan support. So it'll be interesting to see if it actually makes it out of committee and what happens. But thanks. But that's it for this edition of the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast. Thanks for listening. And if you've had any issues with these Bitcoin ATMs, reach out. You can contact us by heading to our website or app and filling out the form. Thanks again.